welcome back to another episode of The Deep Dive. We've taken a break for the last several months, getting back into a regular rhythm. The Deep Dive, as a reminder, is an opportunity just to follow up on the weekend sermon, to explore some areas of God's Word that maybe we didn't get to touch during the message, during the weekend service. Also, we just get to elaborate or have other conversations around it. So really excited as we start a new year, as we start a new series, to get back into this rhythm. My name is Brad Aslan. I'm one of the pastors at Calvary. I'm part of the teaching team, and today joined for the first time by Dr. Paul Utenage. I'm going to use the full title
That's fine.
today, but yeah, Paul, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you very much. I love the fact that you all are doing this. It just gives so much more opportunity for people just to wrestle with exactly what it was that we talked about. Otherwise, on Sundays, it's your only thing. And so I really like what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and so if you're familiar with Calvary, if you're listening, if you join us either online or in person, you'll be familiar with Paul at this point. He's preached a number of times. He's joined us mid-October-ish.
By the end of October, I think the last weekend of October. It was. In fact, it was Halloween. How's that for a time to get started at church? And
Paul is serving as our intentional interim lead pastor. So again, as you've been listening to these podcasts, as you've been tracking with us, you'll know that we've got multiple members of our leadership team, of our preaching team. You'll still continue to see Dan Borth, myself, involved with this. Chris at our St. Charles campus. Again, if this is your primary vehicle to come alongside Calvary things, our St. Charles campus voted in December. They're going to launch as an EFCA church plant. We're really excited for them. And so Chris might be still joining us for the deep dive from time to time as it makes sense for his schedule, or as it makes sense for, are we even talking about the same thing that weekend? But you'll continue to see myself. Paul will join us, Dan, and then actually later this week, we're going to do a second part of our, this weekend's message, where I'm going to be joined by Brett Toth, one of our counselors here at Calvary, and Kyle Bradley, a member of our communications team who leads all of our media stuff, just to talk about what growth has looked like in their lives. So
that's going to be fantastic.
I'm pretty excited for that. And then we will continue doing our deep dives around worship songs too. So loved the one that Caleb and I did several weeks ago on Honey in the Rock, and he will be joining periodically to just unpack, hey, what can we learn about the theology that we sing? And so
that'd be great. So you do a little bit of country western songs on this too,
if
as
it's
well?
Caleb, absolutely. Yeah, maybe get a little bit of bluegrass in there too. So, Paul, before we dive into Matthew chapter 13, which was where we were this weekend, we'd love to just set the table a bit for you. You've been in ministry a number of years. You've been you served a number of different churches in different roles. I'd love to just introduce you a bit to our listening audience. So, what's just kind of loosely, what's your ministry background experience? What's the role that you're going to be doing, or the way that you're specifically serving Calvary? And then I have another question as well.
Okay, so I became a Christian when I was a child, 7 years old, actually in a church here in St. Louis.
Oh.
Yeah, so in St. John's Baptist Church in St. Louis, and lived here for a while.
Whoa. St. John's Baptist Church.
Yeah.
My dad grew up going to St. John's.
Okay, now that is wild.
Now we have a further conversation to have later.
There actually than there is for he and I, because let's see, we might be somewhat close in age.
Yeah, he's I don't want to say his age or ask you to say yours.
Well, I'm 68, so yeah.
Yeah, you guys are very close in age, actually.
Well, we probably were at St. John's at the same time then.
Yeah.
We may have even done children's ministry together.
Wow, okay. All right, we didn't know that was coming up.
As children, obviously not as the pastors.
Right, absolutely. So you came to faith at St. John's Baptist Church.
Yep. So been involved with churches all my life. By the time when I decided to definitely start working in churches, I did student ministry for about a total of about 14 years.
Okay.
Left student ministry, in a sense, kicking and screaming, only because I really felt like God wanted me to change.
Yeah.
And started then a string of churches. I did not realize it at the beginning, but it was a string of churches where he would use me as a little bit more of a change agent, if you will. I don't mean that you always change just for the sake of change, but for churches that just were really working on some stuff. and was involved with that. So really here, because I think we were talked about even in other situations and other scenarios where it was kind of a decision once I knew I would be retiring. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I knew I would continue doing coaching for retirement and doing coaching for leadership stuff. And I got connected to this IPM, Interim Pastor Ministry, went through their training. I said, you know what, I can do that. In fact, actually, I've been doing that all my whole career. And 2 weeks after they accepted me into that, I got a phone call they said, there's a church in the St. Louis area. It's in St. Peter's. And I had actually known of this church. And so I said, I'm willing to listen. And then lo and behold, here we are. That's history plays out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so a lot of the roles you've been in over the last, I don't know, however many years have been more of an executive pastor.
Senior pastor and executive pastor were the two after youth ministry. So with 14 years of youth ministry, did 12 years of doing a senior pastor, and then found this role of executive pastor that just fit me because I like doing a lot of things all at the same time. And I know senior pastors often don't want to admit it, but they only focus on a very few things. For sure. And so I'm always like, well, your role's a little too narrow for me, and so I just enjoyed this. But with the roles that I had with executive pastor, I still had preaching, I had the leadership, and I had the whole staff, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the question I guess I want to ask, I know you've had some education. Where did you go to seminary, college?
Yeah, so master's level was at Dallas Seminary, and then went and did doctoral stuff at Denver, and then doctoral stuff back at Dallas again. So I liked that because it gave me a different school than where I first started. My personal journey was such, though, that I ended up doing a lot of training throughout over the years. I'm a lifelong learner, and so I continue to do training both with the counseling side, with the American Association of Christian Counselors and other things, and that journey kind of took me where I really don't fit just particularly one school, although I still fit a very clear classic kind of conservative evangelical world.
Yeah. What are some things that God has used? One of our values, even on this podcast, is we want to, keep our Bibles open.
Always,
right?
Yeah, always.
We want to be curious, right? And we want to learn. And so what are some ways that God has grown you, and what are some things that God has put in your path to help you as a learner as you seek to just understand this faith thing that you get to be part of?
In reality, my growth has been very much in those environments that we're talking about now with our vision for Calvary Church. So in the area of worship, there have been times where I've been either in maybe just a concert, or other times where I'm at church, where I love worship every Sunday, but like everybody, and since I'm breathing like everybody, some Sundays and sometimes just kind of are more meaningful to you at the time. There is a sense of obedience. There's a sense of placing ourselves before the Lord in all worship. But there's times where you just get those goosebump moments, and other times when you're actually listening to somebody else preach. When you're preaching on your own, you're not always listening to yourself because you're looking for other people to go, am I connecting? Am I communicating? And you're actually watching for them. My wife says that if I'm not careful, I'll always stand with my toes hanging off the edge of the stage because I'm just trying to get right there into people because I'm pretty relational in my style. And so that's been there. There's times of those worship. There's definitely times where in my own, I am contemplative and I am a Bible student. And so a lot of those times for me have been major times of growth. But even when I'm studying on my own, there is always still then that conversation. There is that connection, if you will, with other people where we just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what, and God just uses those in our lives. If I was on an island on myself, I know that God promises I would still continue to grow, as you preached this week. God's always, He assumes and expects growth. So I know we would preach, but it'd be interesting to see how He would do that if that were ever to happen, because He uses other people so much.
For sure.
It is that connection. And so it's those things. So mentors, I've had some great mentors over the years that I've really benefited from. And then interacting with peers for me is a lot. I love other leaders. I get jazzed by other leaders. And I think it's probably vice versa. We all get jazzed by leadership.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those environments, if we will. I won't add that to the church's vision because that's not always the environment, although everybody has leadership influence somewhere in their life.
Yeah.
And then we talk about impact. And so I have really been transformed in the area of that type of impact. And we've all got a place that God puts us for that. So, for instance, a couple of them for me, that without a lot of thought ahead of time, a couple of them for me is, one of them would be, I've had a lot of good interaction with different racial and ethnic groups along with what I've done. I actually am a firm believer in that. And so I've been in some situations where there's been both black and white, where there's been, others said brown, but there's all different kinds of ethnicities. And those have been very meaningful to me. Even when I left Peoria to come here, one of the groups that I really missed the most was, we had a group from one church that was predominantly African American, and then our church, which was predominantly white, although our church did have quite a good mix. We aimed at that. But it's one of the groups I actually missed the most because of the relationships that were there, but also that became a place where we said, we're going to do ministry in town together. We wanted to be able to serve in a way that people in the community said, we don't see this much. We don't see white guys and black guys all getting their hands dirty together and serving. And so we did that. And then for me, there's another area where I've been able to spend some time with women who have been caught, coming out of sexual trafficking or caught in some of those things. And my heart goes out to them. And I find inevitably I get a little teary when I'm listening to somebody's story for the first time, and then trying to figure out how can I help. And I'm willing at that point to say, I'm going to give my legs and my feet. I'm going to just do what I can to just be Christ's servant there. And that has grown me. I mean, that has been a large impact on my heart. And it has stretched me to become, I think, to love, as we say, love who and what Jesus loves. So we love who Jesus loves, and we love what Jesus loves. And those kinds of things do transform.
That's really good, Paul. I even just hearing you share of the different areas, the different environments, different spaces that God has used to shape and grow you. I think about this weekend. We're in a series where we're we're studying, reflecting, considering different parables that Jesus tells. The title of the series is The Stories Jesus Tells. We've picked 5 very intentionally, very purposefully. And
some of them well-known and some of them not as well-known.
Which is really cool. Like, some of his stories are incredibly well-known, and then others we don't spend much time on. And what we're doing is we're walking through where is God leading us as a church? What is our vision? Who are we? And we're connecting those kind of vision pieces with the different applications from these parables. And so last week we started your big premise was Jesus matters most, and we want to be a church where, for which that statement is true. Jesus matters most, because when Jesus matters most, transformation follows. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk and unpack a little more of the different areas, different environments. But this week, the focus was transformation. And
by the way, you did a great job on it too, I thought.
Oh, I appreciate it. I get to say this with anytime. Preaching is weird. Like the people
people that don't preach, they don't realize how weird it is for those of us who do preach.
It is odd. So like, you want to do a faithful job. You want to open up the word, share things that are true. You want to get out of the way. You want God to speak through you. But we live in a culture where it's very performance driven, and so like we don't have a great paradigm, I think, for how do we interact with a sermon. So I just so appreciate like congregants, people who share like, hey, this was really you said this, and this was really meaningful, because at the end of the day, like we want to continue to hone our craft, and we want to be faithful expositors of God's word. But one of the things I so appreciate about Calvary is it's a team effort.
Yeah, right,
We're very intentional with creating with a team. We do message.
Underline that word intentional. I mean that's
very
purposeful.
We just had a meeting this morning where we were looking 2 weeks out and looking at the passage, and it's a chance for us to ask questions of the text. It's a chance for us to, hey, I feel like God's leading me through here. I feel like that my study is opening up this. Am I on the right track? It's just a great opportunity. Yeah. And so actually some of the things that I got to share this weekend were things that came from you or from Dan or from Chris or from Matt or Jeff. I mean, it's just a really cool, I really enjoy the process. So I appreciate the encouragement, but I also can't fully take the encouragement just for
None
myself.
of us can.
It's others too.
Even when we study and we're using somebody that died, 300 years ago or whatever it is, and we're using that, we're still benefiting in a sense from that connection, at least spiritually.
Yeah.
And there is that. And what I love about the intentional team is we sit there and we like to say, like for us, connection is one of those environments. Well, if we don't practice that, even in the midst of our own sermon preparation and our own teaching preparation, we miss out. And so people don't get to realize that because they don't see us doing that. And yet the reality is we know we do. And so we have been formed by even others in the preaching preparation process. Yeah. And so we're really living out our vision. We're really living out the vision.
Absolutely.
Just in our own lives. And then we stand individually, of course, with my toes hanging off the side, the end of the stage. But we stand there and we then try to share with others. So one of my mentors long ago said, when you preach, picture in your head that you are instead just sitting on the front row. And you're speaking to yourself as well as everybody in the room together. Yeah. And I have always hung on to that.
That's good.
Because I love that picture. So it's not just me as this person who somehow knows it all, and which we don't, or me who is perfect, and which none of us are. If we can at least be authentic in what we teach and preach, in the worship environment of what we do, we are then bringing in the growth, the discipleship, the connection, and all with us, along with that kind of on our shoulders, or we're standing on other shoulders. Yeah. Either way you want to look at it.
Yeah, that's really good. So we're in these parables. Now, there's a few principles for how do we read parables well. I think the first is, can we put ourselves in the shoes or the sandals, right, of the original hearers? Because there's elements in these stories that Jesus tells that they would be very familiar with. He's picking illustrations that will connect and resonate with them. So can we do the work to, look through the details to find things that maybe we wouldn't pick up on naturally. Another thing is I think we need to realize that when Jesus is telling a parable, often he's responding to a singular question or he's responding to a particular thing. So while we like to pick apart the details and assign meaning to the different elements of it, it's really the main point of the parable is what we need to focus on.
And there are folks who have done that, and in doing that, they do a grave injustice to the story, to the parable. So, I mean, I've heard people try to teach or preach some of the parables before, and so they really are. They're doing exactly what you said. So think in terms of like there's a stake in the ground, and they'll go, how far down did the stake go into the ground? What did the stake itself represent? That has nothing to do with the point of the story.
Right.
So when you did the parable this week, what was the temptation to do one of the details that if you had gotten caught up into it, it would have taken you away from the main point, which is
question.
What I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because I know I'm working on it for next week, and so you're working on it for this week.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So part of it was actually I in a way did go to some of the details, not in a way to like, oh, can I assign meaning for, oh, my enemy is exactly this person, or the work that I am doing, right, is somehow I'm replacing the work that God does on His own. But that actually takes me to my third point there with where's our focus? Can we let the story transform and shape us? And can we allow our presupposition or wherever our mind maybe naturally goes, can we actually allow it to shape and change us? And so there was something that came up where this parable is interesting. This parable is different than some of the other parables. Like we're going to look at Luke chapter.
By the way, one advantage you had is that Jesus did kind of say,
Exactly.
by the way, let me tell you what this one's
Exactly.
like. I wish he had done that for the parable that we're going to have this coming Sunday. But
and that's where I'm saying, like the temptation's always there to try to come up with your own meaning for the story.
Right.
But the benefit I had this week was Jesus actually walks through and offers an explanation for who all the various characters are in this parable. So I'm going to come back to that question, but we only have about 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to read the parable for us, and then highlight a couple things, but then I really want to focus on something that we didn't have time for this weekend, which was really, in some ways, the main focus of the parable. But our focus, at least in gathering, was, hey, how can we
Let's do that.
How can we focus on growth? So Matthew chapter 13, this is the parable of the weeds. And it starts in verse 24. Jesus put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away." I think it's easy for us to try to identify. This is your question. Can I fill in the blank for what the weeds are when there's actually some controversy around who are the weeds? And really, Jesus is just speaking about the activity of the enemy. He's not trying to say, oh, this person is a weed, this person isn't a weed, and it's up to us to decide which ones are which. But
that's right.
So he sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds?" He said to them, "An enemy has done this." So the servants said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he said, "No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." And then several verses later, he offers an explanation. "And then Jesus left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field.' He answered, 'The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear." So in the 6.5 minutes or so that we have left, I want to unpack this ending here.
Yeah, because that's a very serious, sobering ending.
I love how Chris handled it out at St. Charles. He was just sharing this morning that he took it as an apologetic moment. And here at Mid Rivers, I did something similar, but basically just saying, hey, this is a big part of this parable. Don't have time to fully unpack it and do it justice and hit on all the other things we need to hit on. But apologetically, this is something that deserves discussion. And so at St. Charles, Chris, he basically said, listen, we don't like to think of hell. A lot of theology has been done in the last 50 years to try to erase hell or to, minimize it or to apply it's just an allegory. And yet we can go all the way back to Jesus and these aren't my words. These aren't the words of an 8th century theologian. These are the words of Jesus. So they matter and they mean something. Paul, apologetically, I don't want to make a point here that Jesus isn't making, but I also don't want to miss a point that Jesus is making.
By the way, when you say apologetically, just to let folks know. It's a great
question.
And we're talking in terms of apologetics rather than saying, oh, by the way, can you apologize
for
we're
not saying I'm sorry that this is in here. This is a how do we
just want to make that clear for folks.
That's a great distinction. How do we talk about hell in a way that is appropriate how do we even make sense? And I probably should have allotted more time for this discussion than even this. But when we think about judgment and we think about what's going on even in this parable where Jesus is going, like there's a couple things that come to mind. I think judgment it's part of the story. Now, thankfully, God does judgment differently. He allows grace, and judgment doesn't have to be the end of the story. And I think that's the great gift for those who accept and claim and cling to Jesus. But it should bring about a sense of urgency when it comes to evangelism, when it comes to even allowing God to do the growth in us that he wants to do. It does matter. It's something that's easy to be complacent about, but and just like a minute or two, I guess, if someone were to approach you and say, hey, what's up with hell? That doesn't seem like a good thing. That doesn't seem like something that a loving God would permit. How do we...
At least for me, I'm going to go, if I've only got that small little time with them, I'm going to point out probably two basic things. Number one, it's a misnomer. In fact, it's actually a lie to say that everybody actually wants to go to heaven. So if heaven is where Jesus is, there's a lot of people who have been spending their whole lives trying to stay away from Jesus. And so why would Jesus say, I'm going to force you to spend eternity with me when you have been running away from me all my life? And so in one sense, the question of our ultimate destiny, the question of hell, is really simply the outworking of all of our decisions through life. And in fact, if we lived eternally, which we will because of God creating us that way, but let's say we lived on earth eternally.
Sure.
Ultimately, the natural progression of a life that is given to self-centeredness, that is given to self-justification and self, would ultimately become hell-ish, at least, just as the ultimate work of the gospel is to conform us to Christ. And so in that sense, if we can remind people that, look, hell is basically, I happen to believe, yes, it is an actual place. But if I'm talking to somebody who's not quite there yet, I'll say, look, hell is separation from God.
Yeah.
And if you've been spending all your life moving that way, can you imagine trying to then spend eternity against your will, against your choice? And it will therefore be as a separation from God. So imagine the most selfish, narcissistic, self-oriented, self-justifying, self-isolating place, kind of life. That's ultimately what we're talking about. And since God's a God of love, he has to hold accountable, because otherwise he's not loving.
Yeah.
And now I just opened like about eight points on that.
And also not just.
And also not just.
Yeah.
And so we've now just opened up like 8 or 9 different points. If we had the time, we could.
Yeah, we're asking God to not be consistent to who he is. And I think in the book of Matthew, especially too, you get a lot of this imagery of like the fiery furnace, the weeping, gnashing of teeth. Like as Jesus describes hell, there are some figurative elements, I think, of how he is describing hell. But you shared something this morning in teaching team that I thought was quite profound, and essentially, and correct me if you can say it better, but the literal, the literalness, the physicality, the physical reality is always going to be more than the figure of speech can capture.
Because that's all Jesus can. Because Jesus is the one that talked about hell more than anybody else. So when he uses these figures of speech in order to try to communicate what that separation would be like, figures of speech are always less than what the reality is. And when you realize that, it just becomes very, very sobering.
Yeah.
In that conversation.
Yeah. So, well, again, we don't have time to unpack this more. We will probably, maybe in the weeks to come, this topic will come up again. And
I actually think it may actually this coming week, the parable will touch on some of this.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Invite you to follow along on our website. You can always email us at calvary.church. Podcast@calvary.church. If you have questions, if you want to follow up, if you have a topic that you'd like to see unpacked a little bit more. Paul, thank you for joining for this week's conversation. We'll have more in the weeks coming, and it's just good to be back in this rhythm, having these conversations about what it looks like for us to grow in our relationship with Christ. What does it look like for us to be learners? What does it look like for us to keep our Bibles open, to be curious about the truth of the gospel and how it applies to our lives? So thank you for listening, and we will catch you again next week or next time on The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive, a Calvary Church Media Productions podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts.